it was one of our the female prison that we went to, and Rick, he very much has a gift to see people's like struggles. He has a very well read on people. He saw this woman. Initially Rick approached her and she just had such like a not a mean spirit, but she just was angry. Rick approached her and said, "Come with me," and she just flat out, "Nope." Like as far as eye contact, you know, she just kept looking down. She had a lot of like shame on her. You know, we were trying to get a couple of answers out of her of just like, what's going on? Is there anything we can pray for? And Maureen ended up saying like, you're safe. This is a safe place like to share. You know, nothing will happen and we just want to pray for you. And her response was, I'm not safe.
Well, all right. My guest today is somebody who I go to church with, somebody who I serve with, and someone who has gone on a few mission trips that wanted to share those experiences as well as many more. Ladies and gentlemen, Megan. When smartphones came out, like I never thought I could do like the touching on the phone because I just didn't think I was that coordinated with my fingers.
Yeah.
So like I was like a full BlackBerry person for like the longest time.
That's
because I love the physical
ball.
keyboard.
Yes.
And the ball, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. No, that was
Yeah.
clutch.
That's so funny. No, my mom, her biggest thing is like, oh, just ask Siri for like, what she means is like a Google search, like look it up. She's like,
Yeah.
oh, just ask Siri. I'm like, that's not,
Yeah.
and it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But it's just one of those little things where I'm like,
You need grace sometimes when they ask you technological things.
oh
'Cause
yeah.
even with my
completely.
grandmother, she just doesn't get it. And it's okay. She's old.
Right.
It's okay.
Right.
It is what it is. But tell me about your missions trip though. How was that?
Yes. My mission trip. So I've been on a few at this point. But Kenya specifically, it was a big affirmation, or it was almost like a big breakthrough for me, spiritually at least, as far as like my growth. Initially going to Uganda, I was going in with an open mind, and it was almost kind of like resparking my love for Christianity in general, and like kind of reuniting my relationship with God. Whereas this Kenya mission trip, that was more or less like reestablishing like my worthiness as God's child, and it was interesting. Like it was just mainly about growth, just kind of revealing purpose and developing that trust for God, because believe it or not, a girl has trust issues. So
We all have trust issues.
right,
Don't worry.
right. Well, and it's just like kind of figuring out like the level of like surrendering with that,
Absolutely.
and like just letting go of playing God and just releasing that. And so just having that trust and that foundation of everything, it just, yeah, it was amazing.
Was it just those two mission trips that you've been on?
Kind of. So
Yeah.
I went to Uganda last March, and then shortly after that, in I believe it was July, I went to the Mexico mission trip. It was like a 4-day trip down in Baja.
Okay.
And we built 2 houses for families. I was going to do the Ensenada trip, but I have a job. So
Yep. Yeah. Other things you gotta do as well,
yeah.
for sure.
So then I went to Kenya, and then now I sounds crazy, but I secured my spot officially to go to the Philippines.
I did see that.
Yeah,
That's great.
this upcoming July. So,
That's awesome.
Yeah, I look forward to that.
So obviously Mexico's very, it's a pretty short commute.
Right.
But like the Uganda and the Kenya though, like that's a long, long trip.
Yeah, it was the travel. I want to say the travel was brutal, but I feel like the purpose as to why we were going there, it was like, yeah, you're tired, but just when you get there, it was like the 2.5 days of travel just was like, it was fine. You know, you get one solid night of sleep and you're up and ready to go. So I think it's a part of the experience and it's a part of the growth. and realizing like traveling out there with an entire group, like we're all tired. We're our legs are all numb from like the 12 plus hour
I
flights, you
bet.
know? So it's really it's a bonding moment for sure, but then it's also just it gives you a lot of reflection time too, you know, because you can only watch so many movies.
That's kind of what I was thinking about. Is like, where's like your headspace at? Like, are you trying to like anticipate you getting there and like how you're going to approach that time while you're there? Like, what's going through your head at that time?
Yeah, so I think months leading up to the trip, it's always good to kind of really ground yourself in your relationship with God, and pray for the safety, the travel, the things that are outside of your control. For me, whenever I began traveling or would start traveling, you know, even to Uganda, when I didn't really have an understanding of the whole purpose of mission trips and everything, it was important for me to take that travel period as like my own individual reflection. You know, you definitely want to pray beforehand for like prep my spirit, my courage, the wisdom, like have me be able to discuss the right words and convey that to people who don't probably understand English that well. And, you know, you pray to God to allow yourself to put down that barrier and let Him use you to the best of, you know, your ability as far as like just the level of surrendering, you know?
Absolutely.
So for me, whenever we would begin traveling, it was more or less having that internal self-reflection of like, okay, what do I want to get out of this trip, and what is my mindset going into this trip? And majority of the time it's just prepping my spirit and my mind to have like just an open mind. just
Absolutely.
just to keep that open mind, be open for anything, and just recognizing God's call and just kind of allowing yourself to take that risk and just kind of be bold to do what He has planned for you. And it surprises me every time.
Was like your expectation of what you thought God had originally planned for you changed during that time? Did you go in thinking that this is what God had planned for me, and then at the end of the day, at the end of the trip, thinking, well, this was not what I was expecting?
Yeah, kind of. So, so initially, no, because when I went to Uganda, I ended up. So I initially went on that trip because my mom was going on that trip. I was kind of in a place of being, or like I was like in an era of being lost. You know, I just didn't really know what my purpose was or what the point of life was, or, you know, I was just very angry. And I feel guilty to say this out loud,
Say it. Say it.
but, or it's maybe not guilty, it's almost a little shameful when you turn to God in your last, or as your last resort, or like your final moment of desperation. I'll try anything, so I turn to God, and then it just so happens to be like, hello, that was should have been your first, because then it,
We've all been there.
you know,
Trust me, Megan. We've all been there
yeah. And I
before.
know it's like it's definitely the a part of the testimony for sure, and it just makes me that much more grateful, and it allows me to kind of keep that perspective of like He's always been there. But when it comes to going into Uganda, I was just open for anything, you know, so I didn't really know what to expect. Similar with Kenya as well. I was more unsure with how I was able to contribute, like to the team in Kenya. You know, I ended up singing worship there, And I did that in Uganda as well. But other than that, I was super unsure. And even with worship, like I had like a weird level of like unworthiness as far as like a feeling like, I don't play music. I can't read music. Or I can't play like an instrument or anything like that. And so it was almost like a weird and anxiousness, or like almost like an imposter syndrome. Like I shouldn't be up here. Like it's weird. And so there was a lot of like counseling when I was out there of just kind of walking me through that. And so for that, it was a lot of growth. So I think both times going into a mission trip, I was almost like, it's interesting. I was almost at a state or a stage in my life or within my development in my faith to where I was conflicted. And then once I went on that mission trip, it was almost like God revealed that like breakthrough moment, or like that little aha moment for me, to where I can kind of like progress to the next like phase in my faith or walk with
in your walk.
Yeah, exactly. So it was super cool.
No, talking about the imposter syndrome, is that possibly, because a lot of people talk about too, how you sing the words of worship and stuff like that, but yet it's just hard for you for that to resonate with you. Was that hard for you to sing certain words, certain messages in music, and just not really envelop that in yourself?
So basically, how I would feel in like the imposter syndrome is not necessarily with the lyrics of the song, but it's more or less like my vessel.
Your heart?
It was almost like a worthiness feeling, like who am I? How dare I feel like I am worthy enough to go up here?
A representation of Christ.
Yes, in front of these, my brothers and sisters, and sing to them. Because when I sing, I prefer that I believe in every single word that I'm singing within a song, and to where it's almost like my version of like preaching.
Sure, absolutely.
And if I almost feel in a way like a hypocrite, because it's almost like, and I know that now that is obviously the enemy, like putting,
sure.
filling the lies in your head, and just kind of like capitalizing on the doubts that you've already, or the insecurities that you're already having. And I mean, I still have that to an extent, but we're working through it. At least I can acknowledge it. But yeah, for me, rather than like not really resonating with a verse or a lyric, it's more or less just like not like who do you think you are type of,
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, because we just got done with a worship night not too long ago.
Yes.
And that band said the exact same thing too, saying that, we're up here, but we just don't feel worthy enough. It's a very interesting dynamic.
Yeah. No, it was, it caught me off guard when they said that. I was like, that was for me. No, it's funny. There's always those moments too. Whenever, you're in a worshiping environment, there's always something, that,
That
feels
just
like
sticks out to you.
Yeah.
It feels like it's just for you.
Yeah. It's like your little special message, that you're right where you're supposed to be, so, the worship night was amazing too.
It was great.
It was
very good. I liked the stage presence. I like how they set everything up. It was great.
And just like, it was so powerful. And, I was helping out with like being an usher and like helping get in and out that huge cross and everything. And, but it was amazing because we were all still able to be a part of it and also enjoy it and be a part of the worship and the message and receiving all of the, like, just the great intentions.
Yeah,
and,
I know exactly what you're saying though. Like, we were all serving during that night, and it was kind of hard for me every now and then to really get locked in because I kind of had to do my job right.
Right.
And poor Kaylee, she was the one that did teleprompter that night, and she's like the hardest worshiper I've ever seen when it comes to music. She's always into it, and like she had to
Yeah.
do the little scrolling. And like, that's so wrong. She should be
I
out there doing
know.
her thing, you know?
I know. That's so funny you say that because I remember I glanced over to the sound booth area and she had one hand over to the side to like switch it, and then the other one
I
was
saw it
up
too.
so she
I
could
saw
say-
it. I
I'm
felt
like,
so
poor
bad.
girl.
Aw. Yeah, I really felt for her, but no, it was great.
Yeah.
But going back to your missions trip, and
Mm-hmm.
like, what all did you witness?
Ooh. Yeah. So there was a lot of devastating circumstances that we're a part of, or not a part of, but witnessing, experiencing. And when we end up going down there, you know, the reason why you want to prep your spirit and pray well in advance to the trip is because of the circumstances that you're going into. You know, some aren't necessarily the safest, but there's never been a time where let me just disclaimer, Skyline Church, we've never been in a situation at all that was like sketchy. But I mean, you just use that common sense. But when it comes to the circumstances, you know, we visited a handful of orphanages, and we were able to build 9 3-tiered bunk beds for a bunch of babies, and they were big enough to where like 2 or 3 can fit on, you know, a bed. And we gave them brand new mattresses. They're and pillows and sheets and all that stuff. And before, they were sleeping in the dirt, and their orphanage was located a little bit towards the bottom of like the hill of their village. And they have these deep creeks, like these deep canals that are, you know, hand dug out, but they basically filter out like their sewage. And when it rains, it floods. And so when it floods, all their rooms and what they're sleeping on, the dirt, gets flooded, and it's just basically muddy sewage rainwater. And these babies, they already have, you know, a lot of infections and wounds from like cuts, or a handful of them had scabies, which is basically like a parasite on the skin that like kind of eats your flesh a little. Sorry.
Yeah, it's all good.
Censor it. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, so it was very devastating for the circumstances itself, but it's extremely fulfilling, and it really does something to you. The fact that like, okay, we're walking in, we see what is happening, the environment, and we're going to do everything we can to leave a long-term or like lasting mark. And if we can't, as far as, you know, we bring them bags of rice because they can't necessarily feed the children there because there's so many, and just based on the access and resources to, you know, money and food, we will give them bags of rice, but that, you know, eventually that'll run out. So what we look for is what can we provide them that'll last. So we go in and we do all these things, and we also explain to them, do you understand why we're here? And when they say, you know, when typically their response is like, you're helping us, like, because you love us, like, because they're babies. And we say like, no, not that, no, we don't love you. No, I'm just kidding. But we eventually get to tell them that we are here because of the influence that God has moved us to do. Or like, let me rephrase that.
Go for it.
It's more or less like we try to portray to the kids that, and the babies and all the adults, how we are here because of the impact that God has had in our lives, and that we have to help others.
Let's rephrase that. You
Yeah.
don't have to do anything, but you want to,
Right.
out of the
Yes.
love of God that God has given you.
No, exactly.
You want to do these kind of things.
Yeah, and so I mean it's more or less just kind of you can always put a band-aid on like a wound, but long term we try to, if not share the gospel with them, we definitely try to plant the seed and pique their curiosity, so that way when we leave they still have something to hold on to, and can connect with and build that relationship with God. So, in terms of devastating circumstances with the orphanage, that was probably like a big one, is just seeing their living environment, and then the lack of resources and their malnourishment and stuff. It's really hard. We went to a lot of prisons, did a lot of prison ministry, and out there they, if you are a prisoner, you are lower than the low. You don't deserve rights. And so a bunch of crazy Americans coming in and not afraid to shake their hand or give them a hug or have that human contact and human connection. It's, they're very open to listening and of, why we're here, what we have to say. But you hear a lot of crazy stories and witness a lot of, intense moments. I'm not sure if you were there on the Sunday where Pastor Tim, he ended up.
I was there actually.
Yeah.
So I was there service 1, I believe. I think I was the very
cool.
early morning one.
Yeah,
So I didn't get to see you up on there, but
Ooh, thank goodness. No, I'm just kidding.
I looked back at the video. You did fine.
Oh, okay.
You did fine.
Rick.
Because he mentioned a story, and you can
Yeah.
kind of correct me on the story, but from
Yeah.
what I understood was there was someone in the prison that was sentenced to death who was a Muslim. Is that what I was hearing?
Yeah. So
Correct me, please.
yeah. So I mean, that was all true, but in terms of like context, so it was one of our the female prison that we went to, and for me, with my experience with that, I ended up I was sent over to join the prayer team. There really wasn't anything else for me to do at that point. So they're like, yeah, just go try it out, because I'd never joined. And I was shadowing Maureen and just kind of laying hands and just kind of getting a feel for it, because I'd never prayed over people and had definitely never prayed out loud for healing.
No, it's an important position for sure.
Yeah, completely. I mean, it was amazing. And sure enough, the second woman that we ended up praying for was this woman. Yeah, and so what had happened was Rick, he one of the main guys that we love on our trips, but he very much has a gift to see people's like struggles. He has a very well read on people. He's extremely intuitive, and just he gets like those feelings, like I have a feeling I need to talk to this person, or you look like you need a prayer about X, Y, and Z. And so he just has a gift.
He has a spiritual gift.
Completely. And so he saw this woman, and before, when we were walking in, we saw all these red, they were bright red letters. They were like a combination of like 2 or 3 letters, and there was like LF, which stood for like life sentencing. There's like SW, which is security watch, which ended up being you can also think of it as like a suicide watch.
Yes.
And then
By the way, Epstein didn't kill himself. But continue.
I was like, what?
Continue.
gosh.
I'm sorry. I just had to say that.
No, it's fine.
When I think of suicide watch, that's what I'm thinking.
No, literally. No, okay, yeah. That's funny. But basically, this lady had CDM on her dress, and we well, I ended up finding out later that night that it meant condemned. I obviously we ended up praying for her, so I knew her circumstance before, but it was interesting because I saw a couple more women with the CDM on their dresses, so it was a little unsettling looking
Yeah.
back on it now. But initially Rick approached her, and she just had such like a not a mean spirit, but she just was angry and like
And hardened.
defeated. Yeah,
Her heart was
completely.
hardened.
Yes, very, very
I can
cold.
understand that.
Yeah.
Gosh.
And you can
Totally.
just see in her face, and we just didn't really understand why. And Rick approached her and said, "Come with me." And she just flat out, "Nope, not going to do it." Like, no. And she was barely talking, but just kept saying no. And he was like, "Come on, we just want to pray for you." And she was like, she's like, "No, you can't. I'm Muslim." And he was like, "That's okay. We're not trying to convert you or anything. We just want to pray over you." And she still wouldn't do it. And one of the correctional officers ended up ordering her to take Rick by the hand and go off and
Oh,
get
wow.
prayed. So it was literally like she was being like drug over basically. And so that's when he brought her over to us, and we kind of started communicating, and she wouldn't look at us like as far as eye contact. She just kept looking down. She had a lot of like shame on her. And she was, we were trying to get a couple of answers out of her of just like, what's going on? Is there anything we can pray for? And she kind of just shrugged. And Maureen ended up saying like, "You're safe. This is a safe place, like to share. Nothing will happen, and we just want to pray for you." And her response was, "I'm not safe." And we're just like, "What? Wait, excuse me?" And she just said she's not safe. She ended up communicating that she had 2 weeks to live until that day, and she asked us to pray for her children back at home, that's staying with her mother. And there wasn't any information on father or anything like that, so we just didn't pry, and that was kind of enough for us. We're like, okay, we get the gist of what's going on. So we all started praying for her, and I'll never forget it because I was, we're all laying hands on her, and I'm right in front of her, like eye level, just staring at her, just praying over her. And it was one of the most spiritual moments, I guess, I've ever had up until that, or just in general. It was probably one of the most spiritual moments that I've ever had, just period. And it was amazing. And at the end of it, Rick, he starts praying over her as well, and he ends up telling her something along the lines of like, you can be at peace, or you can have this feeling of freedom now. You don't have to carry this on you. You can give it to Jesus. And in that moment, she was like, "I want to be freed." Oh, I always get chills. But but in that moment, she ended up accepting Christ. And it wasn't our goal. We just genuinely wanted her to not be so burdened in that moment. Because what do you say to somebody who's not going to be alive, in less than 13 days from now? And it's not going to be of natural causes. Like, and it's, yeah. And we found out that the way that they carry out the condemned sentencing is death by hanging. So it's like, it's not quick. And from the moment that inmates get sentenced with the condemned sentencing, they never are able to have contact with their family ever again. So who knows how long she had been there for? Who knows how long it had been since she spoke in or was able to see her kids? The second we started praying for her kids is when she just completely cracked open and was open to what we were, kind of praying for. And so it was very, very heavy.
I bet.
But I mean, moments like that, it changes you. It shifts your perspective because you come back to America and you see, social media, the news, and you're just like, man,
Yeah.
there's a bigger picture going on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, gosh, we complain about not having the Wi-Fi. Somehow the Wi-Fi is out for the day,
I
and
know.
all these little things.
Yeah.
It's bad. But then when you go to a place like that, right? It's just like you just count your blessings every
Oh,
single
yeah.
day. And
No, completely. It was eye-opening to say the least.
no, I'm guessing very little English out there.
Actually, a lot of English.
Good, cool.
Yeah, so they one of the main languages that they teach out there is English in schools. So they speak Swahili. There's also a ton of different like dialects out there,
Sure.
but mainly it's Swahili. And then whenever they're in school, or if somebody else in the neighborhood or in the village area knows English, it'll kind of just, it's one of the more sought after languages to learn. So when we go there it just, I don't speak another language, so it just really gets heavy on my heart where I'm like, dang it, what an American mindset. Like they're learning English and like, so we can communicate, but I don't have to learn anything,
Yeah.
It's just, it's a lot of self-awareness when you're out there, just with like the little things. But yeah.
Because I was curious about like language barrier, like like how do you go about teaching the gospel to a complete different region and all that? Like, is it fairly simple in a way?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, because you're really just trying to convey love, and you're really trying to convey like there's a higher power that loves you. There's and just for you, like you are here because of him. It's just
And when you're
and
when you're sleeping on dirt too, I'm sure that's very hard to get that feeling that there is a higher power out there looking for you.
completely. And so when we're there and playing with them and loving them, and we really try to convey that we are here because of God's love, and we are here because we've experienced God's love, and we want you to know that he has the same love for you, but for the younger ages who don't really know the or don't know English yet, we have translators there, and like the teachers, or like the orphanage directors, I should say, or like the mamas there.
Supervisors.
Yeah. They speak English, so they'll kind of like translate and all that fun stuff. But
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
what's their perception on America? I'm really curious about that.
they look at us as if we walk on streets of gold and have endless amount of money coming out of our pockets, and everything's in abundance, which technically it is.
I mean, technically, they're not wrong.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say streets of gold. I hit a couple
No,
potholes on
but
the way
I
here.
mean, we got brick, we got some stuff going
No,
on. You know,
right, exactly. But they just they don't think that we live in any type of struggles, as far as even mental struggles, loss of family, drug addiction. Like they're like, even just like the toxic families, abusive living environments, foster care, like any type of like devastating situations that happen in America, they don't think that they don't think that exists, or we've experienced that. So immediately they look at us crazy, because they're like, how can someone like you know anything of what I'm talking about, And so it was an amazing experience, because we all have to, well, we don't have to, but we end up sharing and speaking at one point or another to either inmates or the orphanage, and just kind of communicate what brought us here, what's happened in our lives to bring us to this moment. And it really breaks that barrier, and allows us to connect with them, as far as like we're coming on, like, coming to you as another human being, rather than I'm up here and I'm just going to help the less fortunate. Like, no, we are all equal in the eyes of God. Like, we are all God's children, and we want to convey that there is better for you because we are living proof of that, you know? So it was amazing. I was able to kind of get that experience as well. Pastor Tim loves to push your growth,
That's
and
good.
sets you up for growing opportunities. And obviously, it always makes me a little like, "Huh," but I'm so grateful for it. But he ended up pulling me aside, and he had me speak to a bunch. It was our last orphanage that we went to, but just kind of speak a little bit of life into them by sharing a little bit of my story. And in that moment, it was kind of, it really brought me a lot of peace with anything like negative that has kind of happened in my past, to where it almost made it all worth it, because I was able to share that story in a sense, like, provide that reassurance to them that no matter what happens, you'll always have that support and that love through the Father. And it just, it for me, it had like that, it almost, everything kind of fell into place. Like, everything in my life that has happened was all meant for that moment in a way. And it gave me so much fulfillment and purpose. It was so nice.
Now, like, what has your life journey been?
You're like, so what happened?
Yeah, so, I mean, you don't have to go in full gritty details, but everyone has their own story
Yeah.
about how they come to Christ and, full submission. That, there's a
Yeah.
process to that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting though, because my walk, I mean, it is.
I mean, were you raised as a Christian?
Not really. I mean, I was raised Catholic, but it was almost like a loose Catholic type of religion. Like, we would go to Catholic mass. I went to catechism for like 2 years to receive my communion and everything, and but it wasn't really like implemented within the household, as far as like, we were never reading the Bible. We were, we weren't really worshiping. I mean, but also, I've never been to a Catholic mass that has had, worship music that wasn't very forgettable. Sorry,
No worries.
that sounds so mean, but
You're good.
I was really young at the time, so
Yeah.
but yeah, other than like Sunday services and then Wednesdays when I would go to my catechism after school and everything, there wasn't really the presence of, our religious walk and everything. But my mom and dad, they ended up divorcing when I was about 4 years old. And at that time, my sister, she was, I want to say, I think like 16 years old. But she had tested positive for drugs, for heroin, I want to say.
Wow.
Yeah. And at that point, my mom had been kind of going back and forth, just battling that with her a little bit, like just trying to do what she could. And at that point, when I was about 4 years old, that was like her breaking point, because she ended up going into her room and finding like drugs just like kind of laying out in her room. And at that point,
Not even trying to hide it.
right.
Just out there, just sprawled out.
And at that point, you have a 4-year-old little Megan running around and grabbing everything and touching everything. And
Yeah.
so my mom was saying, she's like, I can't do this. And so she basically gave her a choice. She said, I have 2 rules in this house: honesty and no drugs. If you can't abide by that, you cannot live here. But if you can, you're more than welcome. My sister said, I can't live by your rules. So she left. And so basically, she ended up leaving, of course. It's weird how that's a core memory for me. And then I want to say like 5-6 months later, my mom and I are moving out because my mom and dad are getting a divorce. My dad was probably well, not probably. He was the oldest like male out of 6 siblings, and his dad had passed away when he was like 21. So he was like the man of the house. Everybody idolized and looked up to him. Like he was an amazing, big, strong man in general, and very Italian. And he, so it really kind of like crumbled him a little bit. He was already dealing with a lot of mental health issues. He was undiagnosed, but I'm fairly certain he had bipolar disorder. And then just a lot of depression. He had a lot of like binge eating disorders and stuff. And I can't stand like the whole disorders now because I feel like everybody puts labels on things. But to an extent,
Yeah.
that's kind of what we were working with. But yeah, so divorced at a young age. My sister kind of went off partying her whole life, or my whole life, my whole childhood at least. But I was still in contact with her. I really wanted to still have a relationship with her. And so that resulted in me being put into a lot of situations of exposure that no child should necessarily be around, you know?
Yeah.
And then once I was able to drive, forget about it because I would be able to drive her to and from. And like, there was a point where like, I was 7 years old and in a car with her, and we are just like cruising, windows down and bumping Nicki Minaj and thinking that we are so cool, and turned out we were in a stolen car and I had no idea. Yeah, I mean, I was, when I was probably like 11 or 12 years old, where, we were cruising down to the men's prison to pick up her boyfriend.
Interesting.
And it was her flavor of the month. Sorry. And we picked him up, and they like ran into the liquor store to get just a couple bottles for them. And I was like, oh, she forgot her wallet. And I like grabbed it, and it was one of those wallets that like clicked open. It was like those weird 2000s type of wallet. Mm-hmm. And I clicked it open, and it was like her needles and stuff had all fallen out. And I was like, dang, that's not normal for an 11-year-old to see.
Could you comprehend what the needles and all that?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it was her whole like kit for it. So, I've experienced a lot at a very young age without actually participating, which is, I feel like that kind of saved me.
That's a blessing.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely, my life could have been very different if I chose to participate, but I've been always observant at a very young age as far as like, just, okay, if I do this, this will most likely happen, or my life will probably end up here, So I was extremely wise at a very young age, but, and my relationship with my dad was good. But then when I was about 11, he was diagnosed with cancer. He was diagnosed with leukemia. And it was leukemia, and it was like 2 types. I didn't even know there were types, but
not just a stage, but a type.
Well, he had 2 types of leukemia.
Okay.
But I didn't know that there were types.
Neither did I.
Is there? No, I'm just kidding. Whatever. He had leukemia, and it was stage 3, so it was a little more, serious. And with that, I mean, a couple years later, I want to say in like, when I was like in 8th grade, I want to say. So that's like 14. So like 3-4 years after that, he ended up going into remission, which is great. But he needed a bone marrow transplant. With his bone marrow transplant, it didn't fully take. So he ended up contracting an autoimmune disease called graft versus host disease, which is shortened to GVHD. Basically, it like weakens anything the
immune system.
It basically attacked anything weak on him. So he got a cut on his leg, and his disease kind of worsened it, and he wasn't able to walk for like almost 2 months. He got a fever. He almost died from it, just from like a small little gash. because it got infected, and one thing after another. He ended up needing like one of his toes amputated.
Wow.
His teeth started like not decaying. That sounds so gross. But he needed all of his teeth extracted and wore dentures. He ended up going blind, and so it was a lot from seeing like a 6 foot, 200 something pound man that like he used to play hockey and used to.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, he
Love
used,
hockey.
Yeah, he used to referee for professional hockey.
Oh wow. Okay.
And then he'd host like professional hockey tournaments all over like the world. So he was the guy to be like the entertainment. He was like the personality hire. You know, he was just like the big guy, you know, whatever. And so to see him go from that to then me needing to like just guide him anywhere, you know, I'd have to drive him everywhere. And so I mean it was a lot. So it
That's
ended
tough.
up being a lot. And then and that was mainly, you know, I was helping him throughout cancer or like his cancer. I was helping him throughout like his cancer and everything like that during middle school. And then when I was like, I want to say middle school, so like when I was like 13, 14ish, I began actually caregiving for him because they couldn't really afford anything in addition as far as like help or nursing or whatever. So I ended up caregiving for him. At that point, I enter into high school. Then boys became a thing. No,
Darn us.
well, I wasn't really like interested in boys, to be honest. I mean, I never really.
Well, bi-curious maybe?
No, no. Oh my gosh, no. Sorry. You need to have like a headphones warning for how loud I just yelled.
It's okay.
No. No. No, I just didn't get like they just were very immature. Like, you know, it just
Yeah, we can be.
well, and also just hearing like the boys talk or
Of course,
whatever.
yes.
It's just like ugh, like nothing.
Yeah, the locker room talk. Yeah, it's a thing.
Yeah,
It's
and
a
it's
thing.
like yeah, and I have very pretty friends, and so all the boys would go for like all my friends. So like when you're in middle school and high school, like redheads or gingers are just like almost like a point of like just to like mess with or like laugh at or you know whatever. Just like you get made fun a lot for like having red hair, and so which makes me a little sad because I feel like my hair is slowly darkening a little bit. So I'm like, I need the ginger to stay. But yeah, so I wasn't necessarily like interested. I would be friends or friendly with you know, the guys just because they're dating all my friends. And so
Yeah.
but I ended up this one guy was like really trying to pursue me, all this stuff. I wasn't really interested, and then long story short, he ended up dating me for a little over a year, but it ended up being very abusive. So I was just at that time, I was dealing with a lot, you know, trying to balance my sister because, well, let me go back a little bit. My job, or I assumed the role of being like the therapist or like the damage control or just like the healer in my family, whether that's with my dad, whether that's with my sister, even my mom, or all of my aunts, my friends. Like I was just the person to like take on everything. And then where it was, I almost felt like I was giving but never receiving that same fulfillment. And it wasn't anybody else's fault because I was also just not taking the time to pour into myself, you know? So when things started getting abusive with this guy, I was just more or less like, okay, well, at least it's something. Like he says he loves me, you know, like so it was just understanding that.
Especially you said this was in middle
worthiness.
school, right? So you can just kind of take what
So
you
at
can
that
get.
point, it was high school.
Okay.
Yeah.
But still, regardless, though,
Yeah.
you'll take what you can get.
Completely. And so, And it was just unfortunate because that was my first like relationship, really. So it was almost kind of like setting the bar very low.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so I ended up getting out of that, thankfully. And it was probably right before it got like real, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like God, in looking at it now, like God definitely moved in my life at that point, just to get me out. But I, go into college, definitely steer away from God just because I didn't really understand what was happening, or like I felt like I deserved to be selfish, like I'm just over it, all this stuff, whatever. College, it was fine. And then around so in 2020 I turned 21, and COVID happened. We shut down. My dad's health ended up worsening, and he got some lab results back, and his doctor had told him he had 2 weeks to live. So it was very drastic. It was devastating. We had no it one of I mean, people, they try to support you by saying like, he's been sick a long time and stuff, and you're just like,
Trying to rationalize
yeah,
it.
which it's like, I know that, but that's not helpful. No.
Yeah.
But long story short, yeah, in 2020 in like June, he ended up passing away. And with that, I almost felt blessed too, because we got notice, or no, he was given a week to live. He lasted 2.5 weeks, because yeah, I ended up coming over. He ended up, having that moment with me of talking to me about it. And it's interesting because I've never been able to be the person that needed the healing. I've always been the damage control. Like, it's okay. We're going to figure it out. Like, don't be scared. It's, so I was that for everybody.
Yeah.
Like, all of a sudden, like, because now my aunts and uncles' father figures are now, he's now dying. And then my sister is, her father figure is dying, and she's God knows where. So I'm trying to get her there. I have to drop her off, or like stop at like this house real quick for her to be okay, to last, a couple hours there. And then so we go. So it was a lot, I was just dealing with a lot. So then when he did pass, I just kind of like plummeted, and just like spiraled, as far as like, it was super dark for me. And my sister ended up getting arrested again. And she said that she had like a dream of my dad, and she like went to hug him, and he rejected her, and she was like taken back, I guess, and had said, you know, she was like, what? And he was like, look at, like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing with your life? Look at where you're at. And she, I guess, woke up in jail and was like, I'm done. And so she's a whole different testimony. I mean, she's amazing right now. She's clean.
She's doing great?
Yeah,
Oh, it's such a blessing.
I know, she's about to get married. She has she adopted her little baby right now, and she's doing so good. But
That's so great.
yeah, but when it came to my darkness,
So when you were going through that struggle, right? When
Yeah.
when you needed to get poured into, like,
Yeah.
who did you go to? Where did you go to?
I went to friends and alcohol, honestly. And I had never smoked weed. I started smoking weed. And that was probably the biggest, for me, it was the biggest or the lowest low that I had been to, because I had always been a singer and a performer. I grew up performing all over California, whether it was like Disneyland or Del Mar Fair or Seaport Village. Like, I've been on the radio and TV and just like all that like it was almost like I had a little Hannah Montana career when I was little. And 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 then when my dad got sick, whenever I'd take him to appointments, all I would do in order for him to kind of be soothed and chill out is I would just start singing to him. And then when he started coming back and building his relationship with God, it turned into worship songs. And so I would sing a couple of them every now and then, just not really knowing what they meant a little bit, but he just wanted to hear it. So I would sing it to him. So then once he died, and then I started smoking, like smoking and drinking is awful for your voice and your vocal development. There's nothing good.
I'm pretty sure that's what got Adele, and she needed like some kind of vocal surgery because
Yeah.
like she was a huge British lady. I'm sure the way she ate too, but probably didn't help. But
Yeah.
as far as I know, drinking cigarettes, she was a huge smoker back in the day. Then she needed that surgery. So yeah, definitely not good for a vocalist
Yeah.
for sure.
And I mean, my dad was always he was my biggest supporter as far as me singing. He always wanted me to be like touring or like going to Hollywood and
Pursuing your passion.
completely. And then once, I want to say around like 2015 timeframe, he slowly transitioned that mindset to like he wanted me to sing for the church. And he's like, you belong. Like he was my biggest support system when it came to singing. So when he did die and I started smoking, it sent me into a deeper depression because I'm like, it was just like there was nothing like good coming from me or coming to me at that point in my life. And at a certain point, there was a lot of a breakdown in relationships with a lot of my cousins. I've always been super close with my family. But one of them in particular that I had grown up with, she was basically my all the time sister when my sister was sometimes there. So she ended up getting a DUI and was, dabbling with her demons as far as like drugs and all of that fun stuff. And had she kept asking me to go out with her, go party with her. And I would get like a feeling like if I go out with her, something's going to happen that'll like change the trajectory of my life. And I was already super low. And so it ended up causing like a big blowout in, with our relationship in general. So, yeah. So long story short, sorry, I'm like rambling.
No, it's fine.
But basically, 2022 comes around and I'm super desperate. I'm just like, nothing's happening for me. I was extremely really just devastated about like singing in general, just because that's my connection to my dad. And so when I like tried singing in the car one day and it like my voice was ugh, awful. And
Yeah.
so I like I had just had a meltdown. And so yeah, then I come home from work and she was like, so I'm going to Uganda on a mission trip. And I'm like, no, you're not. What do you mean? Like by yourself with like a group? Like absolutely not. And she was like, I'm your mom. You can't tell me what I can and can't do. And so I told her, I'm like, oh, well, I'll go with you. And she was like, yeah, okay, sure. And then sure enough, I put in my deposit and I went to the meeting. I met Tim and Pastor Tim, and he had said, he reviewed my application and he was like, this trip is meant for you. And I was like, okay, sure. And the following week, my heart had accepted Christ. And I was like, I'm open to whatever, like, use me. Okay. Like we're doing this. I'm going to take that chance. And then, I go to Uganda and I became all in at that point. And then Easter rolled around and I surprisingly got baptized because it was just on my heart that day and it was unplanned. And I had so many events to go to that day. And my hair and makeup were all done. And yeah, it was so much fun. And so ever since then, I've literally just, it's been a whirlwind. Everything's happening so fast now.
I hear you. I mean, I grew up as a Christian.
Yeah.
You know, my grandfather was a pastor. My uncle's still a pastor. It's like, you know, Christianity's always been within the family, right? But, you know, like you said, life happens, right? You know,
Right.
divorce on my side of the family as well. My parents got divorced and, you know, complications. You know, you said your complications with your father. My sister's going through struggles as well. So just
Yeah.
trying to, you know, make sense of life and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
just trying to figure out, you know, is there really a God that really cares for you, for me, you know? And trying to process that and go through everything else. And I don't know, you just kind of get to that point, right, where it's like, you know, I got no other options. I got
Yeah.
nowhere else to go. And I'm just going to lean on you, and either you'll show me something or you won't. But, you know, regardless, you know, I'm all in.
Right. No, exactly. And I mean, that was kind of so everything that had kind of taken place in my life. I being in Kenya, Tim pulled me aside, and it's awful. Whenever we're about to speak or present and he pulls you aside, that means you're about to speak. And so he'll give you the finger, like, come here. And the first time he did that to me, I just shook my head. I'm like, no. But yeah, he pulls me aside and ends up telling me, you know, I want you to speak to these kids. And I was like, okay, about what? And he was like, I just need to know, like, are you open? Is that okay? And I was like, yeah, that's fine. He's like, okay, follow me. I was like, okay, cool. So he pulls me aside and says, just outright, you know, I want you to talk to them about your dad. You know, because it's very surface level of kind of what I went over, but like my
Yeah.
dad and I, we like, it's weird. The only way I know how to describe it, which is like believe it in it or not, I just look at it as like a way to describe my relationship with him, but it's almost like we were like soulmates of how close we were. We were so well connected. Like he is and was like my first love. Like I love that man. Like he is probably the funniest man I'll ever know. And I get all my sense of humor from him. No. But no, he was a great person, and so Tim knew that because we had our relationship has been able to, or our friendship has been able to develop, you know, each trip and whatnot, and so him being aware of that, he was like, I want you to speak to them about, you know, your dad. And I was hesitant at first. I was like, okay, what do you mean? Like, and he was like, look, these kids have no one, they have nothing. Explain to them, you know, the 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 loss of your dad, what he meant to you, who it, like what had happened after, and how you were brought back to the father. And so in a nutshell, that's kind of what I said. I went out there and I spoke to the kids. I have no idea what I said, but I ended up, you know, leaving the stage. But you know, I ended up finishing up, and Tim was like, "That was perfect." I'm like, I don't even know what I said.
Well, if anything,
But-
God was probably speaking through you at some points, you know?
Completely. I mean, the only thing I remember is the end, because it was kind of like I almost came to and was like, so no matter what happens in your life, no matter who you lose or you know, the pain that you feel or experience, just know that you'll always have a father to lean on. And it was really cool because just seeing the shift in like energy and
Yeah.
behavior in
And
them,
relatability too, for sure.
completely. I mean, because it's like stories like that where it's like, oh, they can kind of get it, you
Yeah,
know?
for sure.
Just obviously, we'll never be able to understand what their day-to-day life is like and their day-to-day struggles is like. And I think that's the most humbling part of it. Because when taking that experience back with me, I mean, you really look at America right now, and it's just,
I know it's sad.
I mean, it's like you don't even know. Like we have it so like it's almost like we have everything to be happy, but we're still choosing to not be. And that's what's a little bit saddening about it, you know?
But going back to like the whirlwind of like how things have gone like the last couple of years, kind of what I was saying that, I kind of got to a point where it's like I've kind of tried it my way, kind
Right.
of tried, the higher powers way,
Yeah.
and it just got to the point of full surrender. And, I think a couple of years ago, that's when I got baptized. So like,
Oh, cool.
it just took me a while to get to that point where it's like, if I am going to get baptized, like I just want to make sure I know what I'm actually signing up for. Cause
Exactly.
some people really don't care about commitment here in the United States, but for me though, like commitment's a big deal. So like if I
Right.
say yes to something, like I want to, I want to go through it, I want to
Right.
fulfill it.
Yeah.
So, the last couple of years, I got baptized, decided I want to serve at a church, and
Yeah.
decided that doing videography and, photography was one way to do that for sure. So like, yeah, this last couple of years, like it feels like a century.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding. Well, and that was kind of that was the biggest thing for me is going into my relationship with God is I didn't want to just commit and be like, yeah, I verbally committed and then I'm going to just go live my life, you know? And I communicated that with my mom. She initially was, she had committed in 2020 and she took me to the membership dinner and was like, okay, let's do it. And I was, I was super happy for her, but
Yeah.
I had a conversation with her. I'm like, this isn't my journey.
She made you come along so you could also become a member, or was this
Yeah.
just to support her?
Nope, this was for both of us. And
Okay, so she took you along, and it was one of those things where you didn't feel like you were doing it for yourself.
right. And I was and she definitely, I mean, she didn't force me to do it because I am my mother's daughter and my father's daughter. I cannot be forced to do anything I don't want to do. But she, I think she was excited about her growth and like wanted that for me.
Of course. I think we all get to a point now where it's like, yeah, we can say like, yeah, I believe that there's a God, and I
Right.
consider myself a Christian, but exactly like what are we doing with our
Right.
lives? And when we are radically changed, right? Like you want everybody to hear
Yeah.
how God has impacted your life, and you want to experience you want to share that with everybody.
Right. Well, and that's the thing too. Like I get it. Like I want that for everybody else now as well too. I'm like, if you only knew, like, come on,
Yeah.
like, but it's just in their timing. And so
Sure.
I had that conversation with my mom of just like, I'm so proud of you, but I'm not ready, and I want to be 100% all in and ready. I don't want to. Religion's something that was always instilled into me that you don't you take seriously. Like that is the foundation of you, and if you're not going to take that seriously, like then I don't. Does that make sense?
Then what are you doing?
Yeah, what are you doing? Like, so it just wasn't for me. It wasn't my time. But I found so much healing, in Uganda, and the experiences that I had there. It was just a blessing, and it really clicked that like God has always been there for me. God will always be there for me, and there's no reason to look elsewhere anymore. Like, okay, you found your answer. So now what's your choice? What's your decision going to be? And so, going back to, or fast forwarding to Easter, it made sense. I had that feeling if you leave this church not being dunked in that tub right there or in that little pool, you will regret it for the
Yeah.
longest time, and
If not now, when?
completely. And so, and ever since then, it's really, every time I've prayed like, okay, God, use me, and he uses me. And it's amazing how like the power of prayer in that sense works.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
My dream was that my grandfather at some point was going to baptize me. And it just got to
Really?
the point where it just never happened.
Oh, yeah.
He passed away.
Yeah.
Funny enough, he passed away like a month before COVID started. So like he got out at the right time.
See, oh my gosh, that's what I was saying about my dad. So, because he passed away June in 2020, and he was actually in the hospital when it's April something. I forget when. I think it was March, April,
The start of COVID.
where like
It was
they
like
shut everything down.
It was like March 15th around that area.
Yes, because yes, so
It was like a
March.
Tuesday, I'm pretty sure.
Yes, and so my dad was in the hospital. He had me bring him a pizza,
Yeah.
and so I like snuck up there. I had to. They were closing everything down. I was able to sneak up there. I hung out with him for like 4 hours, and then I left. And we couldn't see him for a couple weeks. We were able to finally bring him home after I want to say like 2-3 weeks, and he almost died in there too. It was crazy, but.
Must have
Yeah.
been really hectic during that time.
Yeah, well, and he was trying to make doctor's appointment, like going to the doctor's appointments, and because he can't drive, and with all the chaos of no one knowing what was happening, people were like, "Okay, well, you're cleared to come in," pointing at my dad, but my aunt, who was his like hired caregiver, when I was, at school or couldn't, she was basically helping him out, and they're like, "Okay, but you're not cleared." And he was like, "Okay, so how am I going to get to this appointment? I don't know where
It's
I'm
so
going."
ludicrous.
It just didn't make any sense. It was crazy. And so,
We had the same issue with my sister too, because she's mentally disabled,
okay.
and like it got to a point where like she was getting congested and needed treatment. And it's one of those things where it's like, okay, well, if she has like the mind of like a 4-year-old and like no one else could come in, like how is she going to answer these questions?
Right. She's going to
She's
just go
not.
in by herself. Like,
She
yeah.
needs someone to represent her, and like we just had to fight tooth and nail for my mother to go in there, and
It
like
was
it was ridiculous.
insane. It was so unnecessary.
I understand you got to be careful when like there's stuff that can spread, but at the same time, they're like, let's just have a little bit more common sense, you know? Like we're not bringing the entire family, just
We're not
one.
trying to have a party in the doctor's office right now.
No
Okay.
way.
Like,
That's what Cabo's for.
right. Oh my gosh, side note, I just went to Cabo for Thanksgiving, and
Good times.
no, my mom got scammed like $3,000.
Oh wow. Well, let's. How exactly did this happen?
Just the hotel. It was like she booked her trip through the hotel website, but I guess the website uses a third party.
Oh gosh.
And that third party said that they never got payment. So then they charged my mom's card again for like an extra room. And then she also didn't realize that it wasn't an all-inclusive like hotel. So everything was so expensive. Like 2 tacos were like $20 US dollars.
Wow,
was
I thought
crazy.
it'd be cheaper.
Yeah, same. I'm like, we're in Mexico. How is this happening? Like, it was crazy. So
So I retract my statement. Not good times in Cabo.
I had a great time, but
The wallet didn't though.
yeah, it was when we came home and realized that.
We got scammed.
Yeah, but yeah, no, yeah, but it was crazy with COVID and everything, and so
Yeah.
when he ended up passing away, I felt like that was almost God's mercy, like because he had to go to that hospital so many times, and it got crazier after that. So I just feel like he got out. He got out at the right time.
I feel like God put mercy on my grandfather too. Like that was just the perfect timing.
Completely. Well, and the riots were happening. I don't know if you remember that, but my
I sure
dad,
do.
yeah, he lived right down the street from where everything took place in La Mesa.
Yeah.
I actually worked at a tanning salon in La Mesa. That way I can just pop over to his house right after just to kind of be closer.
Yeah.
And yeah, I had to shut down my store early because everything was taking place.
Yeah.
There was like, I was like, is something like smoking? And I popped my head outside, and it was tear gas. And so I'm like, I like couldn't breathe. I like ran in real quick, and I was like, okay, we're time to go. So
Yeah. 2020 was just nuts, but that's a whole, it's a whole conversation for another
right.
time.
No,
It's
exactly.
us a lot.
Exactly. But yeah, long story short, I feel like he got out at the right time.
Amen to that. Now, you said that you grew up Catholic, so was both of your parents Catholic?
No, just my dad's side.
Okay.
My dad's family, originally from Chicago. They're very Italian, loud Chicago family. And then my mom has just always kind of been a free spirit. I mean, she She grew up in Chula Vista, and she just kind of she's always felt God's presence, and she's always been spiritual, but just never identified it as anything. But she had a very hard life growing up. She's very much a self-made woman, and is instilled that independent mindset into me. She is very much like, never rely on a man to take care of you. Always be able to take care of yourself, self-sufficient, but it's important to, be with a person that allows you to not have to be self-sufficient all the time, always be capable and not dependent, but find somebody that you can have that balance.
Absolutely. Someone that complements you.
Completely.
Because we all have our different weaknesses, and you kind of need someone to kind of fill in those gaps. And
right.
That's,
Right. Yeah.
That's important.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've always had a foundation of good morals, right and wrong, and then biblically right and wrong. I used to get in trouble if I said, "Oh my God," or bleep it out.
Yeah.
Or, and I was little, so I just didn't know. And they're like,
even when it's very rare when I do it, but whenever I pull a G damn it though, as soon as I say it though, I know I know I screwed up.
You look around, and you're like, oh.
I maybe only said it maybe as many as, times on my hand that I have, probably less than 5 times. But when I have said it though, it's like, oh, I feel so bad.
I get the middle name from my mom, where it's like Megan Clarette, where you're in trouble if you get the middle name, or if it's a full name. Run.
Oh no,
run. Yeah.
So you said, I just want to try to figure out the timeline of everything. So you said your father was a Catholic, but he nudged you into Christianity. Is that what you were saying?
So he was practicing Catholic just because that's how he grew up. My mom and dad, they got married in the Catholic Church. But then, he's similar to me. He had always been spiritual. When he was diagnosed, I want to say it was 2011, 2012. And around, I want to say, I started driving. So, maybe when I was 15, 16, he started, he got that spark relit for him. And my uncle, his youngest brother, and his wife, started going to church a lot. And I believe he started just saying side comments, planting the seed with my dad. And so my dad, he was, started going to his church, my uncle's church, and I would go with him because I'd be his ride. And we started going every Sunday, then every Sunday and Wednesday for I don't know what it's called, but it was literally another church service, but on Wednesdays. And then we'd go to their revivals and stuff where it was 4 hours. No, and it was a great church. It's a small little church in El Cajon, and he ended up getting delivered and was baptized and everything, and accepted Christ. And then and then he was, as much as he could, practicing. And on days where he couldn't make it into church, or if he was in the hospital, the pastor would call him and just have it in his front suit jacket pocket, and then he'd just go on with the message. My dad would just be on the phone in the hospital bed listening to it. So it was so amazing, the support of that community within that church as well. And it's so small. I mean, they have, when I was there, it was probably 10 to maybe 20 people.
Oh wow.
It's a really small church, but it was so cool. And when he ended up getting that final week's notice, he had his pastor come explain the gospel to him again, and he wanted to re-accept because he felt he kept saying, he's like, I just don't think it's enough. Me just accepting it, it can't be enough. Like I've
That
done.
might be the Catholic background in him,
Yeah,
possibly.
completely. And he was always just saying, he's like, I don't know, like I don't, I've, he's like, I feel like I've done really bad things that it can't just be forgiven like that. I'm like, and at that point, I didn't necessarily have that relationship with God in the way that I do now, but even then I was like, Dad, it doesn't work like that. Like you're forgiven. I was like, I think you just need to forgive yourself, and like then it'll be a little bit more freeing. And so yeah, it was super cool.
I can only imagine that when your time runs short, that you kind of think about all these things that you wish you would have done, could have done, the things that you regret.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I think I'm so grateful though to have the heads up, you know, because you really never know when your last day is. And then when you are kind of given a timeline, especially when it's a week long. Obviously my dad, he made it 2.5 weeks after that. But it's like it really brings you back to reality, and we were able to have so many conversations that like, you know, a lifetime worth of conversations in a span of 2 weeks, you know? So we were able to talk about religion and in my future and what I want. And, you know, he had a lot of regrets as well because he, after the divorce, he kind of went down drug abuse and his own addictions and whatnot. And we talked about that, and he and I both got a lot of healing from that because he had always beat himself up over, he felt like he was not there, but he was probably the most present parent out of my mom or dad. Like he was there to everything, but he was, and my mom couldn't be because she was a single mom working a lot of the time, you know? So with him, we got to have a lot of amazing conversations, especially about God. And he would always say he at that point he was always reinstilling. He's like, never lose your religion. He's like, always lean on God, always pray. Like he was so, now that I look back on it, I'm like, oh my gosh, he was like really like a great leader for me. And it's interesting because the other day I like searched a message in my phone. Basically, he would always text me 1238. For him, that was his version of I love you forever. And we used to always get in arguments about, I would tell him, Dad, it's 143. It's 143. Everybody knows that. He's like, no, it's 123 because it's 3 words, and the letter 8, or the number 8 is like on the side is forever. And so we'd go back and forth all the time, and he's like, no matter what, it'll always be 143 for me, or I'm sorry, 1238. And so so long story short, I got that tattooed on my hand when he passed, because then
that's
it's
cool.
like, it's just like a him and I thing, because literally it's not 1238, it's 143, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just something that'll always be like for us, which is really cool.
That's really cool. I mean, I give some people crap on the tattoos that they choose to get, but like stuff like that, though, like,
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah, no, completely. And so he ended up, I ended up searching that in my text messages, and one of the first messages from him, it was like back in 2018, and it was a long message about like feeling overwhelmed and like almost like he's reassuring me. Like he's like, you're going through a lot. It's just important to pray, to focus on things that matter in life, with singing and music and prayer and your relationship with God. Like it was a full message where I'm like, where did this come from? And it was so bizarre too, because it was right when I needed to hear it currently as well. So it was cool. I feel extremely grateful right now because I feel like God is even using my relationship with my dad and our connection
Absolutely.
to still kind of speak life into me, you know?
Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
they say, like, you know, there's one church I listen to online. They're talking about like how to hear God's voice, and like one of the ways is through other Christians. You know, so the
Yeah.
fact that he was saying these things to you, like
Yeah.
God was using him to speak to you.
Yeah, and I'm extremely grateful to that, the fact that it was over text message, and like I have record of it,
Yeah.
because obviously back then I didn't get it, didn't receive it, it didn't hit me, and then now I'm able to look back on it and like at present day, and it just has a whole new meaning. So it's super cool because it's like a little message for my dad. I can still hear him or see him like saying something like that to me now. So it's just kind of cool that it's like still there on my phone, and I just didn't know it was
Yeah.
there until like yesterday. So it was cool.
That's so great. So
Yeah.
he's the one that got you into music?
Music's always been a part of my life. So his family, they had like a little family band growing up. And they would they lived in Texas at one point too. But I think majority of the time they would perform in like Chicago area and all that stuff. My whole family are musicians on my
What
dad's
kind of
side.
music then? Like if it's Chicago, are we talking like blues music maybe?
Everything. Literally, I always, that's like my flex. Like I feel like I know at least one song of any and every genre. Like,
Okay.
which is crazy. Okay, don't put me to the test, but
I kind of wanted to actually. I was thinking
Right?
about it.
You can.
Yeah.
But it's crazy. There's yeah, so with him, my dad had just like a very wide range of taste. So I know a lot of music, which is super cool. I mean, so it's nice because I don't have to fall for this like current present radio.
Every once in a while,
Station
every once in a
type
while,
of
there's a
stuff.
good song that is created, but there's just nothing like
Yeah.
older music.
Oh yeah, no, definitely.
For whatever reason, I just think we're just in an age now where it's just very superficial, very materialistic.
Yeah.
And not
Yeah.
that 80s music couldn't be materialistic too, but like, but this point it's like on steroids, materialistic.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's very formulated,
Yeah.
Um,
But what music did your father?
So in terms of like blues and stuff, he was very much like a BB King.
Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Yes, completely, and or like a even more like softer, like a Otis Redding type.
Okay.
And then a lot of rock. He loved rock and roll because we had a family friend. He's now passed away, but his name was Ronnie. He was in a heavy metal band.
Okay.
It was called Dio.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. And
Okay.
So, yeah. And
that's
so,
legit.
yeah. And so he was super cool. And we would always go. They are still doing like concerts for him, like in his honor and stuff. And I believe the last concert I went to was like a hologram of him like performing. It was creepy because like it
Yeah.
looked like him. But yeah, and we'd
So it's Ronnie James Dio. Mm-hmm. Okay.
yeah.
I'm familiar.
Yeah. And so, yeah, we would go and hang out with, well, not hang out, but we'd see Wendy, his ex, and because she's still kind of like managing or involved in that coordination and all that stuff. So it was super cool. And, there's, what else? I'm like, yeah. So, I mean, he has a lot of love for music, even like the girly type of pop music in a sense. Like he has a love for that side, but to an extent, not current, definitely not current.
But the cool thing is about like, having an appreciation for blues and things like that is like you hear blues music and jazz music all the time and pop songs. There's a foundation of it. Like obviously it's not the main point of the song, but you'll pick up some tidbits of some blues elements of some songs, and it's
completely.
like I understand where that originated from.
Yeah. Well, even just like the history of music as well. And just like, I think I view like older type of music as almost like little time capsules, because based on what they're singing or the instruments they're playing, and like it really gives you a glimpse into like the time period, like what is going on historically and economically, and it really can give you a deeper dive, especially just for like even more recently, just kind of talking about this recently. My dad loved Bob Marley, and just what his music represented in the era that it represented what was happening in Jamaica at that time. Like it gives you a lot more insight if you really look into it. So it's
Yeah.
super cool. But yeah, my dad, I mean, obviously, Bob Marley, like I just said, or
But you personally, though, like, what are some bands, what are some artists that you really appreciate? And you could even just go full spectrum. Like you said, you talked about a little bit kind of being introduced to metal. Like,
Yeah.
do you ever listen to Tool?
no, but
No.
I mean, yeah, but I've known of them.
Okay. I saw them back like in 2019. And like, honestly, like, some of their music is very dark and some of the imagery is not really the
Yeah.
most soothing.
Yeah.
But when it just comes to instruments, though, like, those guys are awesome.
Yeah.
Those guys are really cool.
Well, and I have like this this sounds crazy, but I used to be like a Metallica girl or even like Disturbed.
I like Disturbed.
Yeah. Because I also, so this might sound a little mainstream, but I'm blanking on their name. But the Sounds of Silence, the original.
Simon and Garfunkel.
Yes, because I was just gonna say Garfunkel, but I'm like, I don't want to say
Simon and Garfunkel. Yep. you're
Yeah.
good.
But
The rendition that Disturbed did. Very
yeah,
good.
and so that's what piqued my interest. And then the fact that I do enjoy Dio's like sound and everything.
Yeah.
So then that kind of got me into that world. And so as far as heavy metal, there's that. But then there's like the old school like 80s rock, and like Guns N' Roses, all that old school stuff. And my mom would kill me if I called that old school, but
Technically, it is.
I know.
Numbers wise, it's
exactly.
older.
But then it's like the area of like country of like Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson, like all of like
Merle Haggard.
yes.
Like that.
And then I mean I guess it's not really recent anymore, but like a Toby Keith or like George Strait. There's someone else that I'm like
Alan Jackson.
Alan Jackson. Yeah, like all the good ones. And then there's like the once literally this can go on forever. There's like
I enjoy this.
there's like Selena on like the Spanish side of everything. And
Gloria Estevez.
yes, oh my gosh. Yeah, so I mean it's crazy. The span of or like the diversity in music. And I feel
Absolutely.
like up until recently the only worship type of music were maybe that I knew of were like maybe 2 songs, and that was just because I looked up worship music that way I can sing it to my dad in the car. And so it's interesting because it's almost like a whole new world that I'm like now looking into. So,
I can relate to that.
yeah.
Because for me, when it comes to worship music, and that's kind of what I wanted to eventually segue, is the worship music. But for me, though, like worship music is kind of like for me when I got into the Grateful Dead. So John Mayer is my all-time favorite artist, musician, like ever since like 7th grade. Like he kind of found me at a time where I just really didn't have an idea of what the blues was.
Right.
And for me, like, obviously your father grew up on Stevie Ray Vaughan, B.B. King, other people like that.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
for me, though, blues music was introduced to me by John Mayer.
Oh, okay.
And then you kind of realize, well, like, what are his heroes then? It was like Clapton, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Jimi Hendrix, like all those, right? But then over time, right, John Mayer did his own stuff. And, I think around 2016, kind of a really weird announcement, but all of a sudden he just kind of got into the Grateful Dead music. And it was one of those things where like he just kind of followed it quite a bit. And he heard that the members that they had currently were going to retire and they didn't want to do it anymore. But then he talked to a couple of band members and then they restarted what they call Dead and Company, which is like an offshoot of the Grateful Dead. And John took time to pursue that career. And I'm just like, well, I really appreciate what John's done with his music and what his music has done in my life. Like, I'm just gonna go out and support him. So I just bought a lawn ticket. They played in Chula Vista the first year. And it was one of those things where like the Grateful Dead, like I've heard about them, but I only maybe knew like 1 or 2 songs. So it's one of those things where it's like, finally, out of like the first hour, there's actually one song that I know now that I actually can vibe to.
Oh, that's cool.
And it just gets to the point where it's like, okay, well, I just want to kind of see the future through. So it's like, you continue to listen to the YouTube, all the stuff that they release or whatever online. And like, okay, well, I kind of like this song.
right.
I kind of like this song.
Yeah.
didn't really care for that song the first go around, but like now I enjoy it. And that's kind of like worship music for me. It's like going to, young adult service, main service. It's like there's songs where it's like, okay, kind of catchy. And then like a few times later, it's like, I enjoy this. Like this is my jam. Like I hope they play this song this morning,
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Well, and I definitely agree with that because when first going to church, I was like, oh, worship. Like, cause it just felt like I did not believe that people are this happy to sing these songs. Like I was like, oh my gosh, okay, we get it. Like it's so cheesy. And then when I kind of was a little bit more open in terms of like my walk with Christ and everything and just developing that relationship or on my end of that relationship, I, going to church and just sitting and listening to the songs, it like hits a little different. And then it gets catchier and then you start singing it and then I start playing it in my car and then it's completely what you were saying of like, then you go into church like, ooh, I wonder what they're going to play today. So it's super cool to slowly develop in that because before it was like I just didn't like it and I felt judgy on it. But it's almost like I was thinking about this the other day actually because I listened to these worship songs that, well, I guess they're not worship songs. They're Christian songs, but they sound a little bit more like mainstream. I don't even know what you'd call them, but
okay.
But I was listening to it and I was thinking like, why don't people play this more often? Or like, why don't people actually, why aren't people a little more open to like Christian type of music or Christian based music? And I was thinking like, it's almost like the positivity of it is like not cool, like, cause I feel like worship music, it makes me feel something and like a little bit more lighter and positive. And it's just interesting that like people just aren't as open to it.
Yeah, because once you label it worship, right, that's like, okay, well, this isn't my music. This wasn't made for me. So that's kind of why I appreciate, other artists that I grew up that I loved was Switchfoot and The Fray. And they're both very Christian based. They just don't consider themselves Christian because of that whole idea that they don't want to isolate themselves from everybody else to possibly listen to. Because I totally understand that. So like, there's definitely subtle messaging in a lot of those songs that they play. Like for instance, right, like, what is it? It's not Dare to Move. Meant to Live, I think is the song by Switchfoot, but like there's a lyric that says we were more than this world has to offer. And that's very much like Romans 12:2.
Yes.
Or The Fray also has a song called Be Still, and then the whole idea was like be still and know that I am God, So like there's the subtle messaging that you pick up on, I just think is awesome. But yet though, they still curtail themselves mainstream in order to get that message across. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool.
Yeah. No, I'm I just get extremely excited and like just with the future because I know I'm dedefinitely not finished yet in terms of like my growth. I feel like there's never really an end to it.
There's so many avenues that you can focus on and try to improve more. Like it's just like playing golf. Like you're never a master at golf. Like there's always little ways that you can always improve. And there might be one way where today I'm feeling really strong in this area. And then for some reason, this area is just really, really weak.
Yeah.
It just comes and it goes.
Yeah. And I just think me having that, like, almost like that epiphany type of feeling, it just makes me a little bit more excited for the future. And I, just because I know that like God's got me. So it shifts that, perspective for me just in comparison to like literally 2 years ago.
And I feel for me, my walk is more excited when I'm walking with other people that are kind of in the same boat that I am,
Yeah. No,
it holds
completely.
me accountable. Whenever I'm low, they pick me up. I do the same, vice versa. Like it's nice being in a community and growing in the same direction,
Right. Yeah.
And if I didn't have that direction, if I decided not to go to young adults, like who knows where I would be at this point. I definitely wouldn't be doing this. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah.
Most likely not.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's interesting. It's very true when people say, you're a product of your environment. So I think it's extremely motivating. It's all about the people you surround yourself with.
Absolutely. It's infectious. People can really just latch on you, and you kind of start kind of picking up the mannerisms, the different things that they do, and you're curious about how they do certain things.
Yep, exactly. And it feels like I described it in Kenya, talking to our group and everything, and I was like, I feel like I'm just like, it's almost like an unquenchable thirst. Like I can't get enough. Like I just need more now. And it's almost like a sense of urgency. Like I have to keep growing and I need more. And like, I just need all this information. And one of the pastors there, he was like, okay, but he's like, that's God's call. Like, don't feel like you're behind or get discouraged. Just keep at it. And it'll come like that fulfillment type of feeling will come. So like your feelings are in the right direction, but don't like get down on yourself for feeling like you're not doing enough. And I'm like, okay, that's a good reminder. Like
it's a good position to be in, to be thirsty
Right.
for God and the
Right.
Word.
Yeah.
Because I feel like a lot of people aren't necessarily thirsty, but they're dehydrated. They just don't have anything. And a lot of people are complacent with that, which is very sad.
Completely.
Because I was to a point where it's like, okay, I say I'm a Christian, but I'm not really doing anything with that faith.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's kind of like, it's more or less about what you, like the impact you had on other people, or like the influence that you were able to provide to someone or something. Because you can be an amazing person, but what do you have to leave behind? I feel like is the biggest, for me at least, is the biggest goal. I want to be able to kind of leave something behind that was meaningful and just in God's light, because in a way, my dad did that, and my mom's doing that. My sister, like he had a great influence over a lot of people without recognizing that. And he wasn't even able to really tap into like his full potential with that because he got caught up in other things. So it's like, I'm healthy. I'm able to do that. And it would be insane for me to ignore God's gift or call just because I'm prideful or I want to play like director of my life. You know what I mean? So,
Absolutely, of course.
Yeah. And it's a lot more freeing too, just to kind of release that control, because I've always had to be in control of everything. Always had to be damage control, the fix it person. I had to be able to coordinate. And if I'm there, if I'm with my sister, nothing bad can happen because I'm able to intervene. Nothing can happen with my dad if I'm there with him because I'll know what to do and how to handle the situation. Where it's like, then with me, it's like, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to have to be in control. And so God has allowed me to let that go, but we're still working on it.
Has submission been really hard for you?
Yes, absolutely.
It was really hard initially as well, I'm guessing.
Oh yeah, for sure. Because I mean, I've never been able to trust anyone or anything to that level, and so it's kind of like I don't even know this person, or like I don't even know this thing, and I'm just supposed to, So it's just kind of like understanding. Like you slowly learn, and little by little, you're able to kind of slowly release, because that's initially I thought everything's supposed to happen at once, and I thankfully was given a lot of reassurance that that's not how it goes. Sanctification is a slow process. But yeah, I mean it's gradual, but it's exciting. I'm happy that everything is kind of led up to what it is right now.
And let's be honest, there's days where you give full control to God, and there's other days where you just kind of take it back ever so slightly.
Once it works out, based on me, like my control, typically I have that self-reflection period where I'm like, okay, maybe I shouldn't have, intervened. Maybe I should have just let, like God puts me in my place every now and then.
Yeah. He definitely
He
gives
reminds
me,
me.
he definitely gives me like a good reframing of where my mind should be. Because I mean, in America, right, we're thinking about money, your future spouse. There's just so many things that are going on in America life that we're just so like, we need to get it. We need more
Yeah.
of this, you know?
Yeah.
So when you kind of get that reframing, you say like, okay, let me just kind of readjust how I should be thinking and living it more godly
Right.
and just trying to keep everything in balance. Like obviously we need money to survive,
Yep.
support, but at the same time, money isn't everything.
Right. No, I completely agree. And I think the perspective of like success and everything, it's very easy to put a dollar sign on that, or equate a dollar sign with success,
Because everybody defines success in a different way. No, a lot of Americans think success is money,
Right.
but at the same time, though, it's you kind of need to define exactly what you think a successful life is.
Right. Completely.
And from a Christian lens, it's definitely a lot more different than what the secular version of success is.
Yeah. No, I completely agree.
And there's some times where I definitely kind of get caught up in the secular for sure. Money being the top priority, everything else. And it's just kind of like reframing that and be like, okay, well, how do I base my life based on what God wants me to live?
Right.
And I guess diving into that, right? Like a huge part of life is choosing your partner, your life partner. So like for you then, like, this last couple of years kind of being like a whirlwind and like reframing yourself and trying to adjust yourself. Like what's the dating process like in the modern world for you?
Yeah. So technically, technically there isn't really a dating process for me.
Okay.
I've actually been in a relationship for about 5 years now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But that brings on a whole new set of challenges.
Sure.
Because there's, the relationship before accepting God. And then there's a current relationship that's under the eyes of Christ. You know what I mean? Or under the eyes of like a Christian faith. And so there's been a lot of transition and a lot of adjustment. It does get a little bit it is a little tricky because I've never dated as a Christian, and I don't even know what that means. I don't even know what it looks like. So it's just kind of like, I know what's right, I know what's wrong. So it's kind of like figuring out that balance. And it can be a little bit tricky because I'm in a different stage of spiritual growth than my boyfriend is.
Interesting.
So it's like finding that difference, as far as, I'm not the leader. I don't want to lead. I'm focused on my own growth, and he is focused on his growth. And whatever that ends up being is kind of what'll be, if that makes sense. Like it's
interesting.
Yeah, because we originally were really good friends in high school, towards the end of high school. I go off to college, and we're still in contact. We hang out often. We were just really good friends. And something just switched where I'm like, I think I like you, and I think I like you, like whatever.
That's cool.
And so
How long after, because you said that you were in an abusive relationship in high school, correct? So how, after that ended, that abusive relationship, when did you start really connecting with your current boyfriend?
I want to say my first relationship ended in like 2015, 2016 time frame. I didn't technically meet my boyfriend until 2017 in high school when we were friends.
Okay.
He hates when I say that because apparently he's known me since second grade.
And you dispute that?
I have no idea who he was. Apparently we've had class.
Ouch.
Yeah, apparently we've had classes together. Apparently we've had classes together
It's okay.
since elementary school.
Some women don't recognize that I exist either. So I totally get it.
No.
I totally get that.
No, I mean, but it would get bad. Like he would be like, "Oh, so you know this person, you know this person." I'm like, "Yeah, like they were cool." And he would always get mad. He's like, "Those were my best friends. How did you not know me?" Like,
Yeah.
anyways, but yeah, so it's funny. Like it's fun banter for sure. But we yeah, so I initially met him my senior year of high school in 2017. My ex-boyfriend and I, we had broken up, I think, at like, we dated in, 2013, 2014-ish. Then we broke up in 2015. So it was a couple years.
Yeah.
And I'm like, geez, I have to dig in the archives to remember that.
I know. But very interesting enough, though, that your relationship wasn't based on a faith. And now,
Yeah.
what does that dynamic look like? You kind of said that you kind of are on your own path and he's on his. Like, how does
Yeah.
that merge together at some point?
Yeah, so I am very firm in terms of like my standards and my boundaries. And I think that a lot of it was because my dad always praised me. My mom praised me. I never went without in terms of like love. So there wasn't necessarily like a lack of something that I was trying to find in a relationship. I was just struggling with my own self-worth at the time of that abusive situation. To where once I got out of that, it was almost like a wake-up call where I'm like, wait a minute, there's no way that's how relationships should be. There's no way that I deserve to be treated that way. Like there's a point where someone had told me, like, you want the world given to you, like in a relationship. And I responded with, well, I have the world to offer somebody. So I just want what I'm offering someone else. I want to be equally yoked. I had just learned that term.
Oh, really?
Yes.
It's an important one.
Yeah. And so basically, I mean, my communication skills are a lot better than most people's my age, and with my boyfriend, I am just very honest with my stage and my transition, and he's been very supportive. Of course, there's a lot of other hard conversations that we need to have and needed to have. And then there's also separate conversations that have a lot to do with my spiritual growth, but it doesn't really pertain Christianity at all. It just is more or less like, okay, I'm progressing at a fast rate right now. And at my age, I am looking to get serious. We are 5 years in, and I don't think that you and I both are at stages at this time to take the next step for marriage because we're not solid as individuals right now. So I'm working on myself to become that person. But when it gets to a point to where I'm ready and you're not there yet, you're putting me in a hard spot to make a decision, So it's like, it's a transition, and it's a lot of growing pains right now currently, but
Appreciate you being honest about this, by the way.
yeah, I mean, well, it's great. It's easy. No.
I know,
Like,
but,
I mean-
but you could have easily just said like, yeah, I'm taken, so I can't really talk about the current dating stats. But I appreciate you being honest though, because
Well,
it's
yeah.
real, and I'm sure there's tons of people that are in the same boat.
Well, because I mean, it's different because a lot of what I've heard a lot of people say is, like you kind of have to leave your past behind, and I mean, and it's the same way as far as like an addict's mindset. If you're in recovery, you can't be hanging around the people that you used with,
Absolutely.
which I completely agree. However, when it comes to the development of a relationship, the fact that it depends on how you started. The fact that we were friends for a long time before, and we've always been able to be vulnerable on a weird friendship level of like, there are certain, what I've noticed, a lot of my friends, they're able to tell their friends things that they won't tell their partners. I've never had that with him. So it just wouldn't make sense for me to become a Christian extremely fast to where he's now interested, but not, he hasn't had that click yet, you know? I'm not going to force him to do that. I'm
No,
going to.
he's got one for himself.
Right, exactly. And so I'm focused on that growth within myself, and if he's up there with me like when I'm ready to take the next step, great. But if not, like I've never necessarily been worried about dating. I've never been, that sounded so cocky. I wasn't I, I didn't mean it like that. As far as like, I don't have an issue with that's not true.
I knew what you meant.
Okay. But like, it's never really been like a factor. That's something I've always been a firm believer in, is like when God finds you ready or deems you ready for whatever, he creates the opportunity, you know? And so it's like, whenever, I believe that in a spouse or partner as well. Like if you are focused on yourself as an individual, walking God's light, doing what you got to do, you know, to serve the best way you can, and to give, to be 100% yourself in the eyes of God, he'll make it happen, you know? Like it's just not something would be worried about. And I think in the past, when I'm in relationships or dating people, it would be always like a sense of like control. Like I need to be around this person in order to keep their attention, or I need to know what they're thinking, or what are, you know, just like, just things that are outside of a person's control. And with my relationship with God, this is probably the most like secure I've ever felt as far as like my worthiness, because I know what I'm worth now in a relationship. And so if it's almost kind of like just an act accordingly, you know, and
Yeah.
like my person will show me, and then I will, you know, respond.
But let's just imagine though that that's out of the equation. Like if you were a single Christian woman, like what things are you trying to check off? Like what exactly are your non-negotiables?
So my non ooh. So my non-negotiables, I think, well, the thing is, it's a little bit tricky because I've never dated a self-proclaimed like Christian man before, you know? But
Because kind of where I'm getting at is like discernment, right? Because like there's been a
right.
lot of people that I pursued, right, and like they have said that they have a Christian background of some sort, but then you're really trying to test like how deep is that faith, you know? Is it just
Yeah.
that I proclaim to be Christian and like Easter and Christmas I go to
Right.
service, and everything else I just do my own thing on Sundays and don't
Right.
really think about anything
Yeah.
church related?
Well, and I think for me personally, I've always had to be a leader in a sense, you know, and biblically, that's in a relationship. That's kind of not the woman's role, and so for me, it would kind of I would want to watch or like look for some form of like leadership within the male's role, as far as like the influence within his life. And it doesn't even have to be over a woman. You know what I mean? As far as like how he conducts himself, on a daily basis. It's a lot of observing for me,
Yeah.
And a lot of non-negotiables is
Before you go on that aspect, because
yeah.
it's a very interesting idea though, because like you're very right though, like in most traditional families, the man is the leader. And I've seen in a lot of relationships too, where like, let's just say, for instance, the woman makes more money than the man, and there seems to be some kind of struggle. And it seems like in your situation, right, spiritually, you're more wealthy than your boyfriend.
Right.
So that dynamic must be kind of weird.
Yes. Very much so. Well, not very much so, but yeah, I mean,
You can relate to that though.
yeah, completely. I mean, in a way he's been put into situations where he's had to be a leader of the household or a man in that sense, like quote unquote. But now it's him kind of figuring out what a leader of a household means biblically, because what he is kind of faced as far as like challenges is he will be the man of the house until he has an opinion, or if it's an unpopular opinion to his whoever he's living with, he's almost kind of like a damage control, like come in, help, but like your opinion is, just keep it low, so for him, it's really trying to like navigate those differences of like him understanding that his opinion and communication actually they matter a little bit more than what it's been, validated as before. So when I'm growing in my walk, I really try to communicate that to him as far as like, this is what I need in a relationship, as far as like, I mean, it's almost kind of like I feel like if you are actively dating as a Christian, you're almost trying to prep yourself to separate and become your own household. You know what I mean? Like as far as like creating your own family. And I think right now he's struggling with a pull of, him having to be like the savior of his family, of his household. Whereas that's not really, it wouldn't work for me, There's a difference between providing support and being supportive versus prioritizing. And, biblically for me, I don't think, well, that doesn't make sense. I'm like, biblically, I think, no. But I think that you become your own family. You become your own separate household, and you can support your extended, but it's hard to expect somebody to be able to provide for his family and contribute to a healthy relationship while also not spiritually and individually focusing on growth himself. So right now for me, it's almost kind of, if I was single in dating in a Christian relationship, I would mainly be kind of focused on the man's priorities of like what is of high value to him is the development of himself as an individual, how he conducts himself in terms of leadership roles and skills and abilities, because I feel like I've always had to be that for myself and my family. And if I'm going to release that control, you need to have it under wraps.
Needs to
you
be
know
the
what
right
I mean?
person.
Exactly. So
That's interesting.
Yeah, I'm definitely a lot to handle. So maybe we should be praying for my boyfriend more than me, but no. But I mean, but again, I know what I can provide to a relationship. Not to say that I'm a whole package of a Christian girl, because that is not the case. I'm still in my walk.
Sure.
but it's, you know, as far as a relationship's concerned, I'm a little bit more tuned in to it right now because, you know, we're going on 5 years being together. And
Yeah.
mid-20s, you know, TikTok, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? No, just
I hear, well, I mean, 25, you still got time. A lot of
Yeah.
people that I know in their 30s, they're freaking out right now.
Ugh,
So you got some time.
I'm having like a quarter life crisis.
But in due time, though, and I think
Yeah.
you're right, though, for, you know, what I'm checking off for a woman, I think is different for what you're checking off in a man.
Right.
So there's just different dynamics there. But
Yeah.
I mean, for the nitty gritty, though, I mean, for me, it's like I said, it's, you could say you're a Christian, right? But like, do you go to church regularly? Do you enjoy reading the Bible? Do you have a small group? Like for me,
Right.
small groups, I think are just so important. I pray small groups all the time. I think those are just so impactful in someone's life just to kind of get different perspective and just be in a community together, you know,
Right.
being tight knit. And I think somebody that wants to be in those types of community groups or whatever, I think that's like a huge green flag for me.
Yeah.
And then obviously, like, you know, are they agreeable for the most part? We're not always butting heads.
Right.
Does she get my sense of humor? Does she kind of know how I
Yeah.
operate? Because for the longest time, right, like before, like I really got on this journey, right? You know, the idea of dating a Christian, like a really good Christian, sounded great. But at the same time, though, it's like, well, my sense of humor, the way I like to operate some things
Yeah.
at times, like I just don't want to damage this person, you know? Like they're so sweet. Like the last thing I want
Yeah.
to do is defile them in that way, you know,
That's
of my
funny.
humor.
Yeah. Right.
So someone,
right.
so someone that I can kind of like ideologically kind of like, we're kind of similar in that aspect. Obviously
Yeah.
the same beliefs as far as, you know, what we believe, like how our kids should be raised, how we think
That's
the
a big
government should be
one.
ran. Like there's just a whole bunch of things that you kind of need to just check the boxes of. But then obviously it's like, okay, well, I really enjoy music. So hopefully the person I, you know, am with
Right.
has somewhat of appreciation for music. Like they don't have to be as nerdy of a musician as I am, but like at the same time, just have an appreciation for it, you know?
Right.
And just see
Yeah.
how that complements.
Well, I mean, you need something to talk about.
Yeah. And that's what you're saying about how your boyfriend or you guys are so similar in a lot
Right.
of ways. Like that's excellent.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Well, and see, that's the thing. I think everybody else that, like, any of my friends that aren't a part of the church, if they were in my situation, you'd be hearing wedding bells already. And it's like every box is checked in terms of my relationship with him, as far as like how healthy it is, the stability, our financial situations and everything. But I'm not where I want to be in terms of my growth spiritually, and he's not there either. And that's probably the main and only red flag that I have, and it's probably the biggest deal breaker for me. So that's why it's kind of like, you know, I mean, we've had a lot of hard conversations recently. It was all received very well, both on his end and my end. But it's kind of like, I feel like it's more of like a waiting process, like a wait and see, because you can talk so much till you're blue in the face, but
Yeah.
you know, actions speak louder than words in this instance.
So it's safe to say that if you guys were on the same spiritual path, neck and neck with each other, that you guys would be married, no questions asked.
As far as right now, you know, we both come from households of divorce. You know, his mom and dad are not together. My mom and dad are obviously not together. And it damaged us in different ways, because his divorce within his household came later, in like high school time frame, and for me it happened a lot younger, so it really affected us differently, where I was subjected to an experience that separate household experience a lot earlier. So it's interesting seeing like the outcome of, you know, what happens early versus later in your childhood. But we're very hesitant as far as like, we know like we're committed, but it's like we just got to make sure.
Yeah.
So like, because for me, marriage is forever for me. Like there's not.
As it should be.
Yeah, I mean,
It's a very scary thought, though. I mean,
yeah.
I've had
see when-
I've had dreams before where like I've like You know, you think of how like it's pictured that like you get out of the chapel, people are throwing the rice and
Mm-hmm.
you're getting in the limo or whatever. And I get to the point where I'm in the limo, right? I'm like, what did I just do?
Stop. That's like my worst fear.
So for me,
Yeah.
like commitment for me is like it is forever.
Yeah. So I think it's just the commitment of it. But I mean, with time, I feel like it'll make sense, hopefully. But yeah. But when it comes to like if we were on the same level right now in terms of spiritual development, no questions asked. Yeah.
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 So have you done like any like I don't know, there's so many resources like YouTube or books talking about this certain thing that you guys are struggling with?
Not necessarily, or not at this time, just because I haven't even read the full Bible myself. So
I'm guilty of that too.
but I mean, I'm more concerned right now with getting myself in line with my walk right now of what God wants for me. I'm in my selfish era. So I'm not worried about it, especially if he's if I'm seeing like the progression on his end with his like curiosity, with his just with certain X, Y, and Z, like whatever, then it'll be something that we can look into together. But as of right now, I feel like I'm more focused on my spiritual growth because if I'm not if I don't have anything in my cup, I
Yeah.
can't pour into anything else, whether that's a person or relationship or anything like that. So it's like I got to make sure I'm good before I can be able to contribute to anything. And that's what I've learned just over the years with my dad, with my sister, like because I think that's what made me spiral so hard after his death is because I was so empty to begin with, and I was giving any and everything I could. And once like my love like died, it was I just kind of like spiraled, you know. Whereas if I had the relationship with God that I have now, even though it's so young and new, back then, like it I would be in a completely different spot. It wouldn't have taken me this long. And I say this long, like everybody I say that to, it's like, you're so young, it's whatever. But
Time catches up with you though at some point.
yeah, I mean,
It does.
for me, it felt like it took a long time. Yeah.
But going back to that though, I kind of talking about the whole idea of like success and all that, like how some certain people define success. Like for you, like do you have like a goal where you feel like at this certain point spiritually, I feel like I'll be closest as I'll ever be is being complete to going on to that next step of working on somebody else and not just you? Like how do you define that?
Um,
Do you think you'll ever know?
yeah, so I think for me, like my idea of being complete is being able to like rapid fire just a handful
Scripture
of
and things like that?
a handful of
Okay.
like verses and just being able to I'm going through this in my life, so let me refer to this section of the Bible. Like I can't do that. I would just flip open the Bible, close my eyes, and just pick a page. Be like, please tell me something like hopeful, you know.
Yeah.
So it's
So studying the Bible is practically what you're saying. You really want to know
Yeah.
it full fledged.
well, so far everything that I've learned from the Bible it's I look at it as the actual answer to like everything, like almost everything, anything that you are struggle with, anything that you like. If you need advice, like don't go to your friends. I mean, to an extent, you know,
Yeah.
for like
Don't just fully rely on your friends.
right, exactly. Like it's like blind leading the blind. Come on
Yeah,
now.
that's crazy how old of a book the Bible is, and yet it could be so relevant.
Completely. So, I mean, it definitely there's just so yes, I can recognize it because I feel like I am able to I almost get like intuitive feelings of like or intuitive thoughts of like I need to give this, or this person needs to be poured into. And so like I'll try to do what I can with that just with that situation. And you know, my dad and well, anybody that I have kind of helped or poured into, they would always say, you know, you have such a healing touch, or you bring a lot of comfort or peace. And so I've never really been able to understand it. And you know, so it's kind of like I'm still looking into it, you know.
Okay.
So it's kind of like I am able to make that determination of like, if I have it in that moment, I'll be able to provide. But
Makes sense.
as far as like the relationship, I don't have anything further to give, because I'm still developing in that realm myself.
So what's your Bible reading process then? Like, do you have like a study Bible that you go through? Do you have a certain process in that?
No, which is probably not great. So I have just been, I was actually given a lot of resources, thankfully,
Cool.
about back in Kenya from one of our pastors, because I was extra thirsty in the best way, not in that way. That's
Yeah,
weird.
we get it. We get it.
And so he was giving me a couple of apps where it's like almost like what was it called? Like almost like a Spark Notes version, but in like video form.
Okay.
So it's like I will listen on the Bible app like when I'm driving to work, and then I'll watch a video on it, and then I'll go back. I feel like I'm almost like an ADHD. Like I need all different forms of like the same word.
Okay.
So it's just, I mean, I haven't been able to do it as often. That's another thing I need to work on, is like just prioritizing the time. Because it's like I make time to go on my phone every now and then, you know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, so it's just prioritizing for me. And but basically I'll be able to kind of like read through and then listen and then watch videos and then kind of go back and forth.
So are you not much of a reader then? Is that kind of what I'm picking up on a little bit?
No,
Okay.
I don't.
Interesting.
I like to. So here's the thing. I like to read, but I like to. This is such a waste of money. But I like to have an audiobook with the physical copy.
Okay.
So I'll listen to it while I read,
Okay.
because it just, I don't know. It's more entertaining for me that way.
Is that kind of the ADHD kind of thing that you're just kind of finding some way to be a little bit more focused in
Maybe
on what you're reading?
Probably.
Because I think that probably would help me, honestly. Because for me, it's like when I start reading something, then my mind's kind of off somewhere else, and I'm like, I just finished this page and a half. Like, what did I just read?
Completely. And
I don't know.
Yeah, it definitely helps me zone in. And then if when just based on like the voice, I'll catch myself reading with that voice, like just in my brain. I don't know if people have that.
My biggest thing is I just don't want to see the Bible to be like a sprint through, you know, to really take my time and to really figure out exactly what the text is trying to tell me. And I have this guy right here. It's the ESV Study Bible, and there's just so much information in that thing. Like, I spent maybe 20 minutes, maybe like on like the first couple of pages of Romans. There's just so many things of knowledge that you're just trying to like, you know, try to seep in your head, and it's just a lot.
Right.
But it's good though. It's good stuff though.
Yeah. No, it's a work in progress. I really recently my schedule has cleared up a lot, thankfully. So I'm more determined this month to prioritize my reading schedules, because once, I believe it's like it takes like 20 days or something, or it's like a certain amount of days to create a habit.
Okay.
I just need to create that habit first, and then I'll be fine.
Okay.
But yeah.
I would definitely recommend a study Bible for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, there's either this one here where it's just like a whole bunch of information and you just kind of maintain it, or actually, kind of funny enough, these two are actually kind of the same book, except for this is a journaling study Bible.
Oh, cool.
So they have columns on the sides that you could write stuff in.
Yeah.
And, you know, you could do sticky notes, things like that. Like it's useful.
No, that's awesome. I'll probably look into that.
I would say do something like that. Like that's just such a great way to maintain. And like I said, not just like being like, okay, well, I'm hearing about what Moses did in this certain instance, but like, why did he go ahead and approach it that way?
Yeah.
And then the study Bible will say like, well, in this time, this is what happened. So this is why they needed to approach it in this certain aspect. Like
Right.
it just gives you more solid information. I think that's excellent.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah. No, I agree.
Baby steps.
Yeah, I know. Work in progress.
Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
No. I don't know.
I think we talked pretty good. Honestly.
I talked about everything. I like rambled.
And I appreciate that
I'm
because
like
I can't
all
carry the
over.
load on my own. So I appreciate you.
Well, I just need to be a little bit more organized with my thoughts because I'm all over the place. But
It's okay. You gave me good content.
okay.
And you're more than welcome anytime to come on and talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Yay, cool. I'm excited.
I
That'll be cool.
I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you.
you
No,
so
thank you
much.
for having me.